Don't embarrass the family. That was the first thing my mother said over the phone while I stood in my Chicago apartment, staring at the bridesmaid dress hanging from the closet door. Bright orange. Loud. The kind of color that could blind a person at 10 feet. Tonight, I was expected to wear it. Tonight, my brother Michael was marrying Laura at the iconic Drake Hotel. And tonight, while my family still thought I was bagging groceries at a supermarket, I was supposed to finalize a $1.8 billion merger on the other side of the world. The phone buzzed again. Mom. Claire, are you up? Don't forget to put on the dress Laura picked. And please... Her voice softened, but there was a sharp edge to it. Please don't bring up your job. This day is about Michael, not you. I glanced at the orange satin fabric. It looked less like a dress and more like a traffic cone with sequins. Laura insisted it would pop in pictures. I had my doubts. I have a late meeting tonight, I said carefully. A meeting? What kind of meeting do you have at 9 at night? Honey, just be present for once, okay? The whole family will be there. Don't make this harder. She hung up with the signature sigh I'd heard my whole life. That sigh meant, Claire, you're already a disappointment. Please don't make it worse. I tossed the phone onto the bed and turned back to my laptop. The inbox was stacked with emails from my legal team. Drafts of the Hong Kong merger agreements, conference call schedules, risk assessments. My head of security, James, had even texted, helicopter standing by. In case traffic delays you after the reception at work, they called me CEO Bennett. At home, I was still Claire, the grocery clerk. The truth? That rumor started years ago. When I was building Bennett Global from scratch, I worked the night shift at a grocery store. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I needed to understand how supply chains broke down at the very last mile. Why milk spoiled before it hit the shelf. Why bread shipments went missing by dawn. But my family never heard the full story. They only caught Claire's working nights at the supermarket. And once that version stuck, it never left. At first, I tried to correct them. I explained the research, the investors, the data models I was running at 3 a.m. But every time I opened my mouth, I got the same patronizing smile. Well, at least she's working hard. So I stopped correcting them. And after a while, I started to wonder how long they'd keep believing the lie. The Drake Hotel would be sparkling this morning. Crystal chandeliers, velvet chairs, harpists playing while the guests found their seats. Michael would be glowing. Laura would be radiant. And me? I'd be the sister in orange satin, quietly shoved to the back row, expected to smile politely while everyone whispered about how I never quite figured life out. My phone buzzed with a group text. From Laura, the bride herself. Can't wait to see you, Claire. Just a heads up. The dress might be a little snug, but don't worry. I had the seamstress let it out for you. Make sure you don't eat too much before pictures, I exhaled. Slow and steady. Then I glanced at the clock. 7:12 a.m. 3 hours until the ceremony. 12 hours until the merger call. And one very long day of pretending to be someone I wasn't. I slipped into the dress. The mirror reflected a woman in her 30s, polished makeup, sharp eyes, shoulders squared. I looked less like a failure and more like someone walking into a boardroom. But to my family, I'd still be the sister who never made it. As I zipped up, another message flashed from James. Route cleared. Helicopter is ready at the riverfront. Code name, Camellia camellia, a flower, delicate but strong enough to bloom in the cold. I almost laughed. Even my escape plan sounded prettier than this dress. I grabbed my clutch, slipped on the nude heels Laura had picked, and whispered the words I always told myself before family gatherings. Stay quiet. Smile. Don't correct them. But deep down, a question lingered. How long could I keep playing small when the truth was so much bigger? I still remember the first time my family got the story wrong. It was 7 years ago, at Thanksgiving. We were sitting around my mother's dining table, turkey in the center, gravy boats being passed around when my uncle asked casually, "So Claire, what are you doing these days?" I had just started Bennett Global Solutions. We had 4 employees, 2 laptops, and a tiny rented office. I was pulling 16-hour days, writing code for routing algorithms, pitching investors, running warehouse simulations, and at night, yes, I was clocking in at a grocery store. Not because I needed the paycheck, but because I wanted to see the bottlenecks with my own eyes. I opened my mouth to explain all that, but before I could finish, my brother Michael chuckled and said, "She's working nights at a supermarket." Can you believe it? The room laughed. Not cruelly, but in that way people laugh when they don't know what else to say. And that was it. In one sentence, my entire career was reduced to grocery store clerk. I thought the truth would come out eventually. I thought they'd ask questions, take an interest. But no one ever did. At first, I tried to fight it. I remember telling my mom about our first big contract with a pharmaceutical company. We're helping them ship vaccines across 3 states with less than 1% spoilage, I explained, excited, proud. She nodded, half listening, and said, "That's nice, honey. But do they pay you enough at the store to cover your rent?" It was like a punch in the gut. Another time, I told Michael about a breakthrough in our logistics algorithm. He frowned and said, "That sounds complicated. I don't know how you can focus on all that after working a night shift. You should really get some sleep." And Laura, my soon-to-be sister-in-law, smiled politely when I mentioned a trip to Singapore for a conference. She said, "Wow, your supermarket must have great benefits if they're flying you overseas." I laughed along, pretending it didn't sting, pretending it wasn't lonely to live 2 lives, one where I was building an empire, and one where I was the family disappointment. The truth is, it hurt. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. Because every time they dismissed my reality, a small part of me wondered if they were right. If maybe all my success didn't matter, not if the people closest to me refused to see it. And so I stopped explaining. I let them believe their version of me. The humble one. The ordinary one. It was easier than defending myself. Easier than watching their eyes glaze over when I talked about global freight corridors or predictive demand modeling. I told myself I didn't care. But of course I did. Every child wants their parents' approval. Every sibling wants to be seen. And mine never saw me. Not really. By the time Bennett Global had grown to a billion-dollar company, my family still thought I was bagging groceries. At Christmas, my cousins bragged about their jobs at law firms and tech startups. My aunt gushed over Michael's new promotion. And me? I was the cautionary tale. The one who never left retail. I smiled. I nodded. And inside, I asked myself the same question over and over again. Why doesn't my success count unless they recognize it? I could walk into a boardroom in Hong Kong and have executives twice my age hanging on every word. I could call a senator and get a meeting within a week. I could move billions of dollars worth of goods across 3 continents with a single decision. And yet, in my mother's living room, none of it mattered. I was still the girl in the orange dress, trying not to embarrass the family. I wish I could say it didn't matter. That I was so confident, so secure, that their misunderstanding just rolled off my back. But the truth is, it shaped me. It made me work harder, longer. It made me sharper, tougher. Because if my own family wouldn't believe in me, then I had to build something so undeniable, so massive, that the rest of the world couldn't ignore it. That's how Bennett Global became what it is today. A $4.2 billion logistics empire, 85,000 employees, contracts with Fortune 500 companies. All because I was tired of being invisible. And yet, even after all that, they still don't know. Sometimes I wonder if I let it happen on purpose. If maybe, deep down, I wanted to test them, to see how long they could hold on to the lie. Or maybe I was afraid. Afraid that if they knew the truth, they'd find some way to tear it down. Afraid that no matter how high I climbed, it would never be enough for them. So I stayed quiet. I wore the orange dress. I let them laugh. But on the morning of Michael's wedding, something inside me shifted. Because for the first time, I wasn't just embarrassed. I wasn't just hurt. I was angry. Angry at the years I'd spent hiding. Angry at myself for letting their small vision of me dictate my place in the family. And somewhere deep down, I knew today wouldn't end the way they expected. The night before the wedding, the Drake Hotel looked like something out of a magazine spread. Gold accents, marble floors, chandeliers dripping with light. Laura's family spared no expense. Every detail screamed wealth and power. And me? I was seated at the far end of the rehearsal dinner table in that blinding orange dress, like an exclamation mark nobody wanted to read. I'd barely taken a sip of wine when Laura's brother, Ethan, leaned across the table. He was one of those startup guys. Sharp suit, slick smile, the type who introduced himself with his net worth. "So, Claire," he said loudly, "what do you do for work again?" I froze. My fork hovered in midair. For a second, I considered telling the truth. That I ran a logistics empire spanning 4 continents. That I was on Forbes' list of top female CEOs under 40. That I had a helicopter waiting tomorrow in case international regulators needed my signature on a billion-dollar deal. But before I could answer, Michael laughed. "She works at a grocery store. Honest work, right?" The table chuckled. Ethan raised his eyebrows, impressed. Not with me, but with the novelty of it. "Really? That's refreshing. Most people these days chase careers just for the money. Good for you, Claire." Good for you, like he was congratulating me for being small. For staying in my lane. Laura's parents exchanged glances, the kind that said, "Bless her heart." Her mother, the university dean, gave me a pitying smile. Her father, the real estate mogul, cleared his throat like the subject wasn't worth pursuing. My cheeks burned. I forced a laugh, stabbing at my salad as if that would keep my hands from shaking. Inside, though, I felt the familiar storm building. The conversation moved on. To Michael's promotion, Ethan's latest app launch, Laura's sister saving lives as a cardiologist. Every toast, every story circled around success, wealth, prestige. And every time my name came up, it was followed by silence or a polite nod. I thought I was used to it. I thought I'd built armor thick enough to handle moments like this. But something about hearing it again, in front of Laura's entire family, in front of the people who now defined my brother's world, made the anger rise like fire in my chest. Because it wasn't just ignorance anymore. It was dismissal, a deliberate choice not to see me. And I realized, if I stayed quiet tonight, I'd be setting the stage for tomorrow. For the ceremony. For the reception. For every family gathering after this. They would keep me in that box forever. Then it happened. The waiter leaned over to pour water into my glass, and in the shuffle, one of Laura's bridesmaids, her best friend, a corporate lawyer, made a joke about how exhausting wedding planning was. Everyone laughed. Ethan added, "At least none of us have to wake up at 2 a.m. to stock shelves." The table erupted. My brother even smirked. And for the first time in years, I couldn't laugh with them. I set my fork down, the sound sharp against the china. The table went quiet for half a beat. I looked straight at Ethan, then at Michael. "Funny thing about shelves," I said, my voice steady, louder than I intended. "Some of us actually built them. Built the warehouses, built the networks that keep this country fed. While other people," I let the words hang, "just build apps that crash when traffic spikes." A hush fell. Laura's lawyer friend blinked. Ethan's smile faltered. Michael's face tightened, warning me to stop. I forced a smile, lifting my glass. But hey, honest work, right? I drank, and the silence stretched long enough to make everyone shift uncomfortably in their seats. It wasn't the full truth. I hadn't told them who I was or what I had accomplished. Not yet. But for the first time, I let the anger slip through the cracks. And in that moment, I saw it. a flicker of something in their eyes. Curiosity, confusion, maybe even fear. They didn't know it yet, but the narrative was starting to unravel. Because tomorrow, at the wedding, the truth was going to come out. Whether I wanted it to or not. The next morning, the bridal suite at the Drake was buzzing like a beehive. Curling irons hissed, perfume filled the air, champagne glasses clinked. Bridesmaids in silky robes lounged on couches, while stylists darted around with brushes and pins. I stood near the window, draped in that unforgiving orange gown, trying not to draw attention to myself. "Claire, come sit," Laura called from her chair where a makeup artist was applying her eyeliner. She looked radiant already, glowing with excitement. The other bridesmaids gathered around, her laughing and swapping stories about their lives. Lives that, on the surface, sparkled with success. Her sister, the cardiologist, talked about saving a patient during a grueling 12-hour shift. The corporate lawyer bragged about closing a deal worth hundreds of millions. Another bridesmaid, a tech founder, shared a story about pitching in Silicon Valley. Then, as if on cue, Laura gestured toward me. And of course, we're so lucky Claire could get the time off from her job. She works at a grocery store. Night shifts, right? The room fell silent for a beat. Then came the polite smiles, the nods, the soft, "Oh, wow, that wasn't admiration." It was pity. I smiled back, lips tight. My hands curled around the stem of my champagne glass. They didn't know that just 2 nights ago, I had been in a video call with Hong Kong regulators, finalizing details on a merger that would reshape the global logistics market. They didn't know my calendar was booked solid with back-to-back negotiations involving CEOs who wouldn't make a single move without my sign-off. But why would they? In this room, I wasn't Claire Bennett, CEO of Bennett Global Solutions. I was Claire, the grocery clerk in the orange dress. I tried to laugh it off, but something inside me cracked. Because it wasn't just their words, it was the way they looked at me, like I was lesser. Like I didn't belong among them. And for the first time, I realized how heavy the silence had become. How exhausting it was to bite my tongue year after year while they built a version of me that wasn't real. I sipped my champagne, eyes fixed on the skyline outside the window. Chicago stretched endlessly, towers of glass and steel, the heartbeat of a city built on commerce and grit. My city, my empire. And yet, in this suite, I was invisible. Laura's sister leaned closer, lowering her voice in a conspiratorial tone. "It's sweet, though," she said. "Not everyone has to be ambitious. Honest work is honorable." My chest tightened. I forced another smile, but my hands trembled. Honest work. The same words Michael had used? The same label my family clung to. But honest work had become their way of boxing me in. Their way of dismissing everything I'd sacrificed. Everything I'd built. The stylist pinned the last strand of Laura's hair into place, and everyone oohed and awed. I clapped politely with the rest, but my thoughts were miles away. I pictured James, my head of security, waiting with the helicopter crew on the riverfront. I pictured the draft merger agreement waiting in my inbox, ready for my signature. I pictured my employees, 85,000 of them, counting on me to lead, to make the decisions that kept the company alive. And I thought, what am I doing here? Why was I hiding who I really was? Why was I letting people who didn't care enough to ask define me? "Claire?" Laura's voice snapped me back. She was smiling at me through the mirror. "Can you grab my veil from the table?" I rose, walked across the suite, and carefully lifted the delicate lace. As I placed it in her hands, she squeezed my fingers. "You're such a good sister-in-law already," she whispered. "Michael's lucky to have you in the family." Her words should have been kind. They should have warmed me, but instead they landed like a weight in my chest. Because beneath her smile, I heard the unspoken thought. You're good, even if you're not, like us. In that moment, I made myself a silent promise. I wouldn't ruin Michael's wedding. This was his day, and he deserved joy. But I also knew I couldn't keep playing the part they'd written for me much longer, because sooner or later the truth would come out. And when it did, it wouldn't just change how they saw me. It would change everything. The ceremony began like a dream. The ballroom at the Drake was glowing. Rows of white chairs draped in satin, orchids lining the aisle, a string quartet playing softly in the corner. Guests murmured in hushed tones, fanning themselves with programs that listed Laura and Michael's love story in elegant cursive. I stood with the bridesmaids, the orange dress clashing painfully against their sleek gowns in shades of silver and ivory. The photographer kept adjusting us, angling me farther back, as if hiding me in the frame would make me disappear altogether. I smiled anyway. I was used to being tucked away. Laura appeared, radiant, arm linked with her father's. Michael's eyes welled with tears as she walked down the aisle. For a moment, I forgot everything. The pitying looks, the snide comments, the orange satin. For a moment, I was just a sister watching her brother fall in love. The officiant spoke, weaving words about unity, partnership, and family. I wanted to let those words wrap around me. I wanted to believe I belonged here as much as anyone else. But even in the beauty of the moment, I could feel the whispers. Is that Claire? The sister? She's the one who works at the grocery store, right? I heard she barely makes ends meet. Their voices floated behind me like shadows. Every whisper a reminder of the box I'd been stuffed into. I kept my eyes forward, chin lifted. But inside, the storm was brewing again. The vows were heartfelt. Michael promised to love Laura through everything. Laura promised to cherish Michael and build a family grounded in respect. People dabbed their eyes with tissues. The string quartet swelled. And yet, as I clapped with the rest when they kissed, my own chest felt hollow. Because respect, that word echoed in my mind. I gave it. I earned it. I lived it. But I never received it from the people who mattered most. After the ceremony, the photos began. The bride and groom beamed. The families posed in combinations. Parents, cousins, siblings. When it was time for the bridesmaids' photos, I stepped into position, only to be nudged slightly to the side. The photographer adjusted again. Let's put Claire behind Laura's sister, someone whispered. I obeyed, smiling even as I felt myself fading into the background of my own brother's wedding. And then came the final blow. As the photographer snapped, Laura's mother leaned toward Michael, her voice hushed but sharp enough for me to hear. Are you sure about Claire as a godmother? I mean, with her instability? Instability. My heart clenched. Michael hesitated, then murmured, We'll think about it. I don't want her struggling to keep up with responsibilities. It was like the floor had dropped from under me. Godmother? They didn't even trust me with that? After everything I'd built, after everything they still thought I was unstable, unreliable, unworthy. My throat burned, but I forced the tears back. Not here. Not now. The reception loomed ahead, glittering and grand. I could already picture it. Champagne towers, long toasts, laughter. And me, once again, the punchline. But something inside me had changed. As I stepped out of the ballroom, phone buzzing in my clutch, I saw the name on the screen. James. Helicopter is ready. Hong Kong needs you in 2 hours. For the first time all weekend, I didn't feel trapped. I didn't feel small. I felt power stirring, waiting to be unleashed. And I knew. Before this night was over, they would finally see me. Not Claire, the grocery clerk. Not the family disappointment. But Claire Bennett, CEO of Bennett Global Solutions. The reception was a spectacle. The grand ballroom of the Drake glimmered under crystal chandeliers, every table dressed in ivory linens and gilded cutlery. Waiters floated between the guests with trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. A jazz trio played in the corner, while Michael and Laura took their first spin on the dance floor, Smiles plastered across their faces like something out of a movie. I sat at a table near the back, orange dress catching the candlelight in all the wrong ways. Around me, Laura's family and friends buzzed with conversations about venture capital, medical breakthroughs, and international travel. Every sentence seemed designed to remind me I didn't belong. But tonight, I wasn't listening the way I used to. Tonight, my phone kept vibrating against the clutch in my lap. Emails from Hong Kong, messages from my legal team, updates from James. The merger was minutes from closing. And when it did, it would send shockwaves through the business world. The toasts began. Laura's father stood first, glass raised, delivering a speech dripping with pride. He spoke of his daughter's accomplishments, of Michael's bright future, of the union of two extraordinary families. The applause was thunderous. Then Michael spoke. "My sister Claire," he said, voice warm. "She's always been there in her own way. Doing her humble work, honest work. The kind of work people don't brag about, but that keeps her grounded." Laughter rippled through the room. I felt my stomach twist. Michael didn't mean harm, but his words sliced deep. In front of hundreds of people, I was once again painted as the underachiever, the odd one out. I glanced down at my glass. My reflection stared back, distorted by the champagne. Enough. As the clapping died down, I heard Laura's mother's voice again. This time behind me, hushed but audible. "She's sweet, but can you imagine her as a godmother? It wouldn't be stable for the child stable." That word again. Something in me snapped. I stood. My chair scraped against the polished floor, cutting through the murmur of the crowd. Heads turned. I felt hundreds of eyes on me, but for once, I didn't shrink. "Excuse me," I said, my voice clear and steady. "There's been a misunderstanding." The room fell silent. Michael frowned, confused. Laura tilted her head. I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone. One last email pinged through. The merger had closed. The numbers flashed on the screen. $1.8 billion acquisition finalized. I lifted my eyes to the room. "My name is Claire Bennett," I said, "and I am the CEO of Bennett Global Solutions." Gasps rippled through the guests. A few people laughed nervously, as if waiting for the punchline. But I didn't waver. For the past decade, I've built a company that operates in 42 countries, employs 85,000 people, and moves billions of dollars of goods across the world every single day. Tonight, while you've all been toasting to family achievements, I signed a merger that will reshape international logistics. I let the words sink in. So no, I don't bag groceries. And I am not unstable. What I am... I took a breath. Is someone you never cared to ask about. The silence was suffocating. Guests exchanged wide-eyed glances. Some grabbed their phones under the table, already searching my name, seeing the Forbes articles, the press photos, the headlines. Michael's face drained of color. Laura's parents froze, their polite smiles collapsing. Ethan's jaw hung open. James appeared in the doorway of the ballroom, his expression calm, professional. He caught my eye and gave a subtle nod. The helicopter was ready. I set my glass down. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a board call waiting. Congratulations to the bride and groom." And with that, I turned and walked out of the ballroom, heels clicking against marble, each step louder than the last. In the hallway, I finally let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. My chest felt lighter, my spine straighter. For years, I'd kept myself small. For years, I'd let their silence dictate my place. But not anymore. Tonight, they saw me. Not the grocery clerk, not the family disappointment. They saw the truth. Claire Bennett, CEO. The night air outside the Drake was sharp and cool, a stark contrast to the suffocating heat inside the ballroom. I walked through the revolving doors, every step deliberate, my heels striking the pavement like punctuation marks at the end of a long, unfinished sentence. James was waiting by the car. "Helicopter's ready, ma'am." he said simply, opening the door. His face betrayed nothing, but I could feel the pride radiating from him. He had seen me in boardrooms, in crisis calls, in moments when empires trembled. But tonight was different. As the car pulled away, I glanced back at the hotel. Through the glowing windows of the ballroom, I could still see the guests, heads bent together, whispering. Some already had their phones out, scrolling through my profile on Forbes, their expressions caught between disbelief and awe. For once, their whispers weren't about the grocery clerk. They were about me, the real me. My phone buzzed relentlessly. Notifications poured in. Congratulations from board members, news alerts about the merger, even reporters sniffing for a statement. But one text stopped me cold. It was from Michael. "Claire, why didn't you ever tell us?" I stared at the screen. A dozen responses swirled in my mind. Anger, bitterness, relief. But in the end, I typed nothing. I wasn't ready to explain. Not yet. The helicopter waited on the riverfront, rotors slicing the air, lights reflecting off the dark water of the Chicago River. As James guided me aboard, I felt the vibration of power, raw, unstoppable, beneath my feet. We lifted off, the city spreading out below us in a glittering grid. Skyscrapers rose like monuments, the lake a black mirror stretching into forever. From up here, the whispers, the pity, the years of dismissal, they all seemed so small. I thought of the countless nights I'd worked in silence, the sacrifices, the doubts, the sting of every time my family brushed me aside. I thought of the little girl I used to be, desperate for approval. And then I thought of the woman I had become, a woman who no longer needed anyone else's validation. But beneath the surge of pride, there was something else. Something heavier. Sadness. Because as much as I had wanted them to see me, I hadn't wanted it like this. Not with shock. Not with shame. Not in front of hundreds of strangers. I wanted them to ask. To care. To have seen me long before tonight. But they hadn't. And now they would never forget. The city lights blurred as we sped toward the horizon. I leaned back, eyes closed, the roar of the rotors drowning out the storm in my chest. For years, I had hidden behind silence. Tonight, I had broken it. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, the world would know me for who I really was. Claire Bennett, CEO, builder, survivor. Not because my family finally recognized it, but because I finally claimed it. The helicopter soared higher, the ballroom fading into a memory. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of being seen. I was ready. When I walked out of the ballroom, the silence I left behind was deafening. For years, I had been the invisible one, the family afterthought, the butt of quiet jokes. And yet, in one sentence, one revelation, I had turned their world upside down. Behind those golden doors, the whispers had started. I could feel them buzzing even from the hallway. Shocked gasps, confused murmurs. Phones lighting up as relatives typed my name into Google. Eyes widening as headlines and Forbes profiles confirmed every word I'd said. She's on the Forbes 100? My cousin stammered, staring at the screen like it was written in a foreign language. Uncle Robert, who'd once joked that I should marry rich if the supermarket doesn't work out, sat frozen in his chair, wine glass trembling in his hand. And my mother looked like someone had knocked the air from her lungs. Her face pale, lips parted, eyes glassy with disbelief. Michael. My brother stood at the head table, hands gripping the edge so tightly his knuckles turned white. He had just finished telling a room full of people that my life was humble work. Now those same people were looking at him, pitying him for not knowing his own sister. Why didn't she say anything? He muttered under his breath, but the microphone caught it. Everyone heard. And Laura, perfect, polished Laura, couldn't hide the flush creeping up her neck. Her parents, the ones who pitied me just hours earlier, now stared at their daughter's new sister-in-law with a mix of awe and humiliation. Everything they'd assumed about the girl in orange had crumbled in front of their guests. I didn't need to see all of it. I already knew. The image was burned into my mind. Relatives scrolling through article after article, mouths hanging open. Guests whispering, how could they not know? How could they not ask? The pity that once clung to me now shifted onto my family. The ones who had been so sure of my smallness, so quick to dismiss me. Regret hung heavy in that ballroom. Regret that they had laughed, that they had belittled, that they had chosen ignorance over curiosity. And under that regret, a sharper sting. Shame. Outside, the night air felt like freedom. Crisp, cool, alive. I walked down the marble steps, heels echoing, head high. James was waiting by the car, professional as always. He opened the door, but his eyes lingered on me, steady and calm. No pity, no surprise, just recognition. He had always seen me for who I was. As the car pulled away, I caught one last glimpse of the hotel through the tinted window. My mother had stepped outside, arms wrapped around herself, her face stricken. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, and for a moment, just a fleeting moment, I felt the sharp ache of longing. Longing for her to run to me, to say she was proud, to say she was sorry for not seeing me sooner. But she didn't. She just stood there, watching the taillights fade into the night. The ride to the riverfront was quiet except for the buzzing of my phone. Messages poured in. Congratulations from board members, calls from journalists, emails from investors. The world knew now, but one notification made my breath catch. It was a text from Michael. Claire, please, why didn't you ever tell us? I stared at the words, my throat tightening. 1,000 answers fought to spill out. Because you never listened. Because you never asked. Because every time I tried, you laughed it off. But in the end, I didn't reply. I wasn't ready. Not tonight. At the riverfront, the helicopter waited. The rotors thumped, sending ripples across the black water. Lights blinked against the skyline, Chicago stretching out in a glittering sprawl beneath the night. James helped me aboard. The vibration of the machine rumbled through my bones. As we lifted off, I looked down one last time. The Drake was shrinking, its windows glowing like fragments of a life I no longer belonged to. Inside, I imagined my relatives still whispering, scrolling through articles, replaying every moment of the night. I imagined the regret settling in deeper, the shame clawing at them. We never saw her. We never even tried. And for once, I didn't feel small. I felt powerful. But alongside the pride, there was sorrow, because part of me had always wanted them to know before it came to this. To see me in private, not in spectacle. To ask questions not out of shock, but out of love. That moment would never come. And maybe that was the price of building my life in silence. Still, as the helicopter climbed higher, I realized something important. I didn't need their recognition anymore. Not my brothers, not Laura's families, not even my mother's. The world already knew. More importantly, I knew. Claire Bennett, CEO, builder, survivor. The night sky opened before me, vast and endless. And for the first time in years, I wasn't running from their version of me. I was flying toward my own. The helicopter cut through the night sky, Chicago glowing beneath me like a constellation stretched across the earth. From up here, the streets looked like arteries, the city alive, pulsing with movement. I pressed my forehead to the cool glass and let the hum of the rotors steady my heartbeat. For the first time in years, I felt weightless, not because of the altitude, but because I had finally spoken the truth. The merger call connected as soon as we cleared the skyline. Faces appeared on my tablet. Executives from Hong Kong, lawyers from London, analysts in New York. They greeted me with reverence, with expectation. Nobody questioned my presence. Nobody doubted my worth. When the final signatures were confirmed, the board broke into applause. "Congratulations, Ms. Bennett," one of them said. Tonight marks a new era. I smiled. Yes, it does. But even as the call ended, my thoughts drifted back to the Drake Hotel, to the faces I'd left behind. I imagined my family still seated in that ballroom, champagne glasses untouched, conversation awkward and halting. My cousins replaying every joke they'd made at my expense. My uncle regretting every dismissive comment. My mother staring at her phone, scrolling through article after article about a daughter she never really knew. And Michael. My brother. I pictured him reading and rereading his text to me, waiting for an answer that didn't come. His pride crumbling into something else. Remorse, confusion, maybe even shame. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I had longed for their recognition. Tonight, I finally had it. And it felt hollow, because I realized what I had wanted all along wasn't applause or admiration. It was love without conditions. A simple willingness to see me, to ask, to listen. And maybe that had always been too much to expect. The helicopter banked east, skimming the shoreline of Lake Michigan. The water stretched black and endless, reflecting the city lights like a mirror cracked into 1,000 pieces. I closed my eyes, letting the wind wash over me, and whispered to myself, "It's time to stop hiding." Not for them, not for their approval, but for me. Because I deserved to stand fully in the truth of who I was. Not just in boardrooms and headlines, but everywhere. With everyone. Always. Tomorrow, the world would read about the merger. Investors would celebrate. Analysts would speculate. And my family? They would wrestle with the new reality of who I was. Some would regret their words. Some might resent me even more. And maybe, just maybe, some would finally begin to understand. But whatever they chose, it no longer defined me. As the helicopter rose higher, I thought about the little girl I once was. The girl who stayed quiet at the dinner table. The girl who laughed off insults. The girl who worked nights stocking shelves while dreaming of building something bigger. I wanted to tell her, "You did it. You proved them wrong. And you don't need their permission to shine." The city grew smaller beneath me, but my vision of the future stretched wider than ever. I wasn't just Claire, the misunderstood sister. I wasn't just the grocery clerk, I was Claire Bennett, CEO of Bennett Global Solutions. A woman who had built her empire from the ground up. A woman who no longer had to hide. The helicopter cut into the night, carrying me forward. Ahead was a new horizon, a life defined not by whispers, not by pity, but by truth. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid. I was free. For years, I stayed quiet. I let my family believe I was nothing more than a grocery clerk, even while I was building a billion-dollar empire behind the scenes. But at my brother's wedding, I finally broke the silence. I told the truth. And in one moment, everything changed. Now here's what I keep asking myself. After years of being dismissed, should I forgive my family or walk away and never look back? What would you do if you were in my shoes? Tell me in the comments. I want to know your answer.